The first one is known as survey. Survey is a structured questionnaire used to gather data from the selected group of the people. Researcher pre-write survey with a limited number of the questions that may be closed-ended or open-ended depending on the information the researcher wants to collect. Some surveys are self-completed, meaning that survey participants records their answer and submit it to the researcher. Other times, researchers may administer the survey directly, such as in an interview. Surveys can be an effective method of collecting self-reported data from a large population of the participant. If Let's take an example. A census is an example of the survey used by a social science researcher. The census requires participants to self-report their demographic information, which the government uses to determine the government representation and how distribute federal funds to the local communities. If we talk about the second one, this is known as participant observation. Participant observation is a type of field research. It is a research method in which the sociologist actively participates in the research group and records their observation. Some researchers perform overt participant observation in which the population for the study is aware of the researcher and the study. Other may use convert participant observation in which the population does not know the researcher is there to study them. The research method is effective for gathering evidence through direct observations of how people interact in a particular setting. For example, a researcher interested in learning about the study habits of the college students might visit a campus coffee shop or a library to observe their behavior. They might note that the number of students who study in these locations, the time of the day most students prefer to study, whether the students prefer to study in groups or alone, and how long their study sessions tend to last. To participate more directly, the researcher may ask to join a weekly study group and assess how the students interact in each meeting during the semester. The third one is secondary analysis. The secondary analysis examines data collected by the researchers. Researcher may use this method if they have a limited resources to conduct another kind of a study, or when compiling a cross study called meta-analysis that examine an extensive collection of the previous research. This kind of a study may allow researchers to connect the findings of the multiple scientists in a single study to either the support a new hypothesis, develop a new perspective on a previous work, or reveal a different directions for the additional research. For example, a secondary analysis may be a researcher conducting a meta-analysis that analyze every study on the academic achievement, for example, of a high school third grade student in a New York City within the last 10 years. The researcher may compare the finding across these studies to determine how academic achievement for this population has improved or declined within a specified time period. Based on their finding, the researcher may consider what social factors contribute to the change in academic performance and purpose additional research into those factors. The type of data collection number 4 is experimental. An experimental study typically take place in a controlled environment such as the laboratory. Since the researcher minimize the influence of outside forces within the environment, this research method may help them to identify the causal relationship between the experimental group. For example, the researcher experiment in a sociology may be a scientist studying how individuals subconsciously change their speech pattern when talking to someone they perceive as an authority figure. The sociologist might recruit participants and give them a task to complete in a lab environment. They may record the interaction and study how vocal patterns of the participant change the accommodate the participant who seems to have the most authority on completing the task. Since the researcher conducted the study in the lab and created the condition for the task, they minimize the risk of environmental disruptions. Point number 5, we have structured interviews. Structured interviews are similar to a survey. The researcher prepares a list of questions ahead of the interviews and verbally asks the participants questions. The researchers typically standardize this type of interview and ask the same questions across the multiple participants so they can gather quantitative data on a topic. For example, researcher may interview multiple college freshmen to collect data about their satisfaction with the dining hall options. The next one is structured interviews. The next one is unstructured interviews. An unstructured interviews is a less formal style of interview. This style of interview may be respondent led, meaning that the participants drive much of the conversation with a minimal promoting from the researcher. This researcher method may be effective for collecting qualitative information. A researcher may use this method to as a part of the case study about the particular individual who might recall their personal experience with a significant event. For example, a researcher studying the cultural significance of a traditional dish may interview three generations of a women who have prepared the dish. Since the dish belongs to the women and their family tradition, an unstructured interview style allows them to tell their story as it feels natural to them. The researcher preserves the narratives of the participant by minimizing their own influence over the direction of the conversation. The seventh one is semi-structured interviews. Semi-structured interviews include both structured and unstructured portions. The interviewer may prepare some questions before the interview but expects to ask follow-up the question based on the respondent answer. This style of interviewing may allow the researchers to collect quantitative and the qualitative data. A researcher may allow use semi-structured interview when the participant narratives or perspective is important to the research. For instance, if the researcher studying how individuals use their gardens for the creative expressions, they may prepare a list of questions they plan to ask each individual, but they may also vary their questions based on the response of each participant, allowing more open-ended conversation and add depth to the researcher understanding of how each participant perceives their garden, while using some structured questions may contribute to the consistency of each interview. The other one is although we didn't mention over there, but we have this one, and this is known as case studies. Case study is a research method that examines a single case or example of something in a sociology. Uh, in a sociology, a case study may apply to the behaviors of the selected group of individual or to a specific cultural group. Case studies are used to gain in-depth knowledge of one particular group, so researchers might not be able to generalize their findings to the other groups, even if they share similar characteristics. For instance, a case of study may be a study looking at how summer camp program for the children of deaf adults affected the camper self-identity within the deaf community. Since study focus on the campers in a one particular summer program, the findings may not apply to campers in authority program, but it may provide insight into the how program activities shape the identity of the participant. The last one, although it is known as the ninth one, but we didn't mention the case studies. This is what you can write it as well. Longitudinal studies. Longitudinal studies examine a sample of people across a long period of time. The researcher may collect additional data from the study participant at a consistent interval throughout the study. These research methods can help researchers understand how variables change over time. For instance, a researcher may be interested in studying the social integration of the children with cerebral palsy during their school years. They may include 100 participants in the study, and they may ask each participant to complete a questionnaire at the end of every school year to collect the information about how well each participant got along with their peers. This study might begin when the participants start kindergarten and kindergarten and continue until they graduate from the high school. So these are some of the types of the collection of the data used by the sociologists to conduct their study.